Oh, the saga of Douglas Murray versus Dave Smith, the comic versus the supposed journalist with a bachelor's degree in English. The credible source. You never been? You never been? Still continues on, folks, because obviously this is far more than defending Douglas Murray. This is defending the narrative that they're losing control of, that they're losing the grip on many, many people that are observing the genocide for what it is. It is a complete genocide. They are understandably knowing what the Zionists are up to, what this projection all unveils. It's not that hard to figure out. And because of that, a lot of the Zionist culture is crumbling, and they're trying to capture as much of the narrative control as possible. So here's just to remind people about this. This is kind of what started it all. Was Douglas Murray, English major, journalist, using air quotes, the same way like Rachel Maddow is a journalist, who pushes many wars, who is a notorious figure. He's an establishment puppet. He may have said the right thing about COVID, but that doesn't whitewash him from all of his other previous mistakes. Went on to Joe Rogan's show with Dave Smith, who was a comic podcaster. And they had a conversation about Gaza. Now, Dave Smith has been very vocal about what's happening in Gaza, as much as any other person, because it's not that it's hard to ignore the constant images and the frightening shock and just dismay of the complete wipeout of a population, the unjust wipeout of a population in defense measure of what happened on October 7th, that we're not even allowed to ask what formally happened. It's really like 9/11. We're not allowed to ask questions about that terrorist attack either. So here's Douglas Murray trying to clap back at Dave Smith, because Dave Smith, who actually knows a bit about this, Douglas Murray is trying to clap back by saying, well, you can't speak about this because you never been. Listen to this. Let's start it all.
Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
So he's trying to discredit Dave Smith by asking him, well, have you been to the Israeli crossing points? Have you been to that country? Have you been involved with the Zionists? Asking Dave Smith if he's been involved with the Zionists. And here's how this went out.
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can.
Right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
no,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going
what
to spend a year,
not a lot of people go to North Korea, but they comment about Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un. Not a lot of people go to Russia, but they had this mindset about Vladimir Putin. I've never been to Flint, Michigan, but I know that toxic water is bad for children. I've never been to California, but I know that there was a wildfire that destroyed a lot of buildings. So his argument is the most stupidest argument you can get from a supposed journalist. This is a nonsense argument. This is him deflecting because Dave Smith makes accurate criticisms that's destroying the Zionist narrative, which Douglas Murray encapsulates himself with like a blanket, shields himself with, and now it's being crumbled and dismantled by a comedian podcaster like Dave Smith. And the only salvation, the only way he can get out of it is try to discredit him by saying, oh, you didn't go to Israel. You never been. You never been. Oh, man. And people rush to defend this guy. Rush to defend Douglas Murray. I don't know if it's because, hey, he has a British accent, sounds like John Oliver, and accents make you sound smarter. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know what it is, but Dave Smith, who was calm as a cucumber, mantled him.
Year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't
but
think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an ex...
Well, you have to go and touch the ground to
No,
be
I
able
think
talk
you have
about
to
it?
see... I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you
Okay.
spend a career talking about something. Yes. I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
This is one of the, I would say, one of the greatest nations on earth. In terms
Certainly
of
one of the great cultures of Earth.
cultures,
Yes.
the peoples.
Yeah.
Okay, so it goes on him on Lex Friedman doing the same thing. Douglas Murray gets dismantled. And then he goes to whine to Lex Friedman, then he goes to whine to Bill Maher, saying that these podcasters out here discussing about Gaza and they don't have any credibility because they never been to the country. How dare they speak on a podcast show? Ah! It hurts me. My brain is rattled. Oh. That's what happens when you're in a cult. That's what happens when you're in a cult. When you have an outsider opinion that just steps inside and completely dismantles it in the most calm, courteous way possible, and you have an epic freakout afterwards. That's what happens when you're a cult. Like, you know, the same cults that, you know, they hounded down for years, Scientology, all that. This is what happens because that narrative has been doctrined into them and brainwashed and manipulated by them for so many years. And now all of a sudden, comics, podcasters, myself, Jimmy Dore, Kim Iverson, so many other people can easily see through this garbage, point all this out, and is now the Zionist propaganda, this machine that they've been running for years, is dismantling. Look at Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, both Jewish reporters. Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen did a documentary. Dan Cohen lived in Gaza, for God's sakes. And he knows this whole narrative is BS. I know this narrative is BS. I've never been to Gaza. I've never been to Israel. But looking through the facts, looking through the figures, deep diving into the story, I could tell you that what you're being told is absolutely fabricated. But Douglas Murray, his only exit strategy is, oh, you never been? You never been? You're not allowed to talk about it because you never been. And then he goes to whine to other people who agree with him because they're all part of this cult. Including, sadly, Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan Peterson, I gave him the defense. I honestly gave this guy the defense in the fact that he lost his psychology credentials here in Canada. He was kicked out, kind of forcibly out of the country. He wasn't allowed. He was a bit of an advocate for free speech. I gave defense to that, but when you see these free speech advocates now going on to podcast shows railing for censorship because of a certain narrative that's being presented or a certain destruction of a narrative, that's when you realize that Jordan Peterson, much like Ben Shapiro, much like a lot of these right-wingers that are supposed free speech absolutists, are completely hypocritical shit. And you're about to see this unfold out in the open when Jordan Peterson was invited on to Joe Rogan, and Jordan Peterson is going to lecture on to Joe Rogan how he needs to put guardrails on, how he needs to vet people on his podcast. He's telling Joe Rogan he's got to vet his podcast. I don't like you having guests that contradict a certain narrative that I won't bring up, but you know what I'm talking about, Joe. Watch this.
Think that virtualization has enabled the psychopaths.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well,
Without a doubt.
That's a terrible thing because the psychopathic types, they're always the death of everything. Like I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah, well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. It's not exactly.
I
He's
think
one
what
level.
they're talking about is like similar types of behavior.
He is talking about that. Yeah, no.
but
What
it's
he's
just,
point.
woke just lets you clarify in your head. Oh, it's like that.
Yeah, but the problem is
It's like Antifa.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas, for example, on the right or the left. But that's not the problem. The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, something like that, is cluster B, that's the DSM-5 terms, histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad traits. They're Machiavellian, they're sadistic. That's about 4%. Okay, so the question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is, and they adopt those ideas, and they put themselves even on the forefront of that.
Right.
But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is they're the Pharisees. They're the modern version of the Pharisees. They're the people who use God's name in vain, right? As they proclaim moral virtue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whether it's right or left or Christian or Jewish or
right.
Islam. They invade the idea space, and then they
So now he finally reveals what all this is about. All this gobbledygook, Machiavellian, all these, psychological terms while looking like the doorman from the Royal York Hotel. This is a guy who gets $50 million from Daily Wire, but yet dresses like the doorman from a luxury hotel. I'm not gonna criticize fashion choice because that's not the point of this video, but now he just revealed his problem with this. He's not going after, say, Ben Shapiro for being a hypocrite when it comes to free speech because of his defense for Israel and defense for this genocide. He's not saying about that. He's not calling that the woke right, which that is woke, by the way. All these Karens on the internet that are supposed to be conservative, these MAGA Republicans that are now boo-hooing because college students are protesting against a foreign country that has nothing to do with America, nothing to do with Canada. God forbid we actually hold our colleges accountable for where their money goes towards. I thought that's what conservatives wanted. But oh, no, not when it goes against Israel. Gotta keep that Zionist money afloat. I can't allow this on your podcast. So now Jordan Peterson is going to tell Joe Rogan he needs to put guardrails on.
use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage.
Yes.
And so then you have the problem, and the right's going to face this more and more particularly, because the left had to face it when they were in powers.
Yes.
How do you identify the psychopathic parasites, 4% of the population, who are clothed in your clothing and
Right.
waving your flags,
Right.
but who are only in it for narcissistic benefit?
So he refers to the people defending children in Palestine that are being massively slaughtered, women and children in Palestine, as psychopaths. These are narcissistic psychopaths, parasites, Jordan Peterson is saying, to the people defending Palestine. What about the people that are defending the genocide? They're not psychopaths. They're not narcissistic. What's in it for them? What's in it for them? That we go mass slaughter an entire population. That's not narcissistic. That's not narcissistic to disarray an entire population, go after your own citizens and arrest them and throw them into CCOT. That's not narcissism for you? I defend this guy. I defend this guy when he lost his credentials in Canada because I thought it was unjust and unfair. Now I'm wondering how he got these credentials in the first place. How this guy is a psychologist is beyond me. Because you advancing warfare for the selfish interest of either business or money or some sort of prophecy, that's not narcissistic as compared to people that just want peace and serenity in the world that don't want their money to go towards malicious bombs that are threatening the lives of innocent lives that had nothing to do with October 7th. So that's Jordan Peterson going after Joe Rogan, making this whole soliloquy here about how Joe Rogan and these podcasters have got to watch their tone. They got to vet people now. They got to make sure they only allow the creme of the crop, because God forbid these parasite psychopaths, these narcissists that go on the air and talk about innocent lives that are being waged. That is so like them. That's so like them to care and to honor children's lives that did have nothing to do with terrorism. This is beyond sinister, beyond psychopathy. Like, anytime I hear about this, it reminds me of the early 2000s when people were, oh, if you're not on the side of the war, then you're a terrorist simp. You're on our side or the terrorist side. You must be a Saddam Hussein supporter. You must be an Osama bin Laden supporter. They told Tulsi that she was an Assad toady. It's been going on for years and years and years. Do you think people are ever going to wake up to realize that this is a psyop? That they use this as mind control to control the narrative, to make sure that it's perpetual war, so that there's never going to be a chance for peace, because they want masterful control of an entire population? And you don't think that's narcissistic as compared to Dave Smith, who just mentions that innocent lives are being waged and we shouldn't be allowing for that? We shouldn't be paying our money to waste warfare for another country's benefit? Really just sick. And now Jordan Peterson is going to run to Fox News. So talk about woke. Talk about being crybabies. Talk about being Karens. You saw Douglas Murray going on to Lex Friedman, going on to Bill Maher, and those two are nefarious Zionists as well. And they're going to boo-hoo and cry to each other about, oh, podcasters are being so mean. Now here's Jordan Peterson going on Fox News, announcing that, yeah, all these podcasts are so bad that they need to be vetted. They need to have guardrails. We got to put some sort of tactic on them. You know, like censorship. Which Jordan Peterson was supposed to be against.
Well, I think the most important thing to do first is to draw a distinction between the political and the psychological, and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian. They use their language to manipulate. They're narcissistic. They want unearned social status and reputation. They're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy and parasitical and predatory. And they're sadistic. So they take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Now, those people also use false cries of victimization, let's say, to manipulate, and they're entitled. They seek vengeance when it's unwarranted, and they protest loudly and make very public cries for reparations that would be self-serving. Okay, now the way those people operate is they look for...
Yeah, I just find it hilarious. The self-serving, selfish people that want peace. Oh my God, you narcissist. You self-serving interest. Just take a moment. I'm a psychiatrist. Can you not have the empathy for Lockheed Martin, for Raytheon, for Palantir that's endorsing this? Can you not think of them, you selfish child? You out there protesting with your poster paper, accurately criticizing a foreign land and why we're subsidizing it. Can you not be this selfish? Oh my God. This is, you can cut the hypocrisy with a freaking knife. It's just so obvious. So obvious. And this is Jordan Peterson, the so-called anti-woke free speech absolutist guy. Same with Ben Shapiro, same with people at the Daily Wire, same with everybody on the right. And it turns out people on the right, just like people on the left, are crybabies. They're all hypocrites. That's what makes them perfect in their little tribes. They don't have any principles. They don't have any morals. They don't have any. They're just going to go wherever the tribe goes. And anything that goes against the tribe is narcissistic, and they're parasites. They have no empathy because they're talking about peace. They want to talk about a ceasefire. Yeah, that would stop the war. And if you want to talk about narcissism, you want to talk about self-serving interest, look who's running the country that's advocating for the genocide, that does nothing for the hostages and purposely does nothing for the hostages as leverage to further their cause of wiping out a population. And they did through the Hannibal Directive, which is they deliberately went after the hostages that were kidnapped on October 7th to further advance their wants and desires for entire wipeout of Palestine, which is serving the interest of the Zionists, serving the interests of the cult, serving the interests of the greater Israeli project. That is self-serving interest parasite right there. That right there is narcissism. That right there is something that should be called out.
Or what patterns of belief form groups that they can infiltrate and then capitalize on. And that happens on the right. We did a report, the same group, on the use of Christ as king as a manipulative strategy by bad actors, hypothetically on the right. And this report identified.
So now he's furthering his Karen woke crybabiness. So not just college students, now it's Christians like Candace Owens, that's a direct threat at her, who have stated that Christ is king. Any Christian that has used that phrase is apparently also part of this diabolical, psychological, sociopathic, narcissistic parasite, according to Jordan Peterson, who gets $50 million to peddle this bullshit. A complete sellout for the Daily Wire that sold an American media company that claims to be a free speech absolutist, but gets all of its advances from the state of Israel. These are all hypocritical sellouts, and it's right in front of your nose, ladies and gentlemen. It's not hard to figure out that these people are absolute hypocrites, and the people that scream the loudest about free speech are going to expose themselves on television as soon as someone criticizes a speech they like. Which, wouldn't that make you a narcissist? Wouldn't that make you a narcissist that you're going to go on TV and cry because your philosophy, your ideals are being challenged by somebody else? I thought that's what you told people on the left. You got to stop this. You can't have a safe space. Facts don't care about your feelings.
The same sort of people on the left, but it's not primarily political. They're wolves in sheep's clothing who look for where there's power and value and then adopt those beliefs as a surface camouflage so that they can elevate their moral status.
You mean like you? You mean like politicians? You mean like everyone that's in power that falsified claims, that lied to people, that gaslight people and manipulate people to get that certain rank of power? Obviously, they didn't get through good morals and judgment. There's a reason why Jordan Peterson got that money from Daily Wire. Not because he's an absolute good psychotherapist. There's obviously more to this. There's obviously a reason why he got that money from the Daily Wire, which was handed down from the state of Israel.
Now, and this has become worse in recent years as far as I'm concerned, because the evolved strategies that we have for dealing with these psychopathic types, psychopathic narcissistic types, don't work well online. And so the psychopaths can get away with their terrible manipulations online, and they can find like-minded people, and they can escape from any reputational consequences. And so there's always been psychopaths. Those are the Pharisees, for example, that Christ points to, the religious pretenders. Those are the people who use God's name in vain and claim moral virtue and even religious devotion. Well, all they're doing is feathering their own nests and furthering their own narrow interests. And the web, social media, anonymity enables them to organize and also hides them much more effectively. And this is a problem.
What's just so fascinating about all this is a lot of this support for this genocide, believe it or not, doesn't actually come from Judaism. A lot of it comes from the Christian Zionists. You know, the very over-religious, celebratory Christians that think, hey, mass slaughtering a bunch of people is going to welcome the return of Christ at the time of the rapture, and we're all going to ascend to heaven because we did the honorable work by slaughtering mankind. I just find that so absolutely insanely unhinged to think that someone can represent themselves as a good moral Christian and say God loves everybody, at the same time supporting the onslaught genocide of innocent civilians. Like, how does that make you a good Christian? I want to ask those people. What would Jesus Christ genocide? What place would God and Jesus Christ go and massacre? You tell me. You tell me. Where in the Bible did it say that Jesus Christ came down to terrorize an entire country with bombs and weaponry and mass obliterated their buildings? You tell me. How does that make you a good Christian? That's the challenge I give to the right wing. Also, the people that are very pro-family values. Hey, you're against abortion. I understand that. You want to be pro-life. So, if you're pro-life, you would have to be pro-life of Palestinians because a lot of them are children. Do you want those kids to die? I thought you just said that children dying in the womb should not happen. So why is it okay that we massacre children overseas? Again, these are all hypocrites. All goddamn hypocrites. That's why Jordan Peterson is crying to Fox News and going to another institution that peddles this war, although Fox News has credited themselves by showing pictures of Gaza and the destruction and actually reporting some decency of this, but they're still pushing the narrative. And as he's telling you at home that that's happening for the pro-Palestinian people, that's what he's doing. So he's projecting. This is all projection. Everything that he's saying to the other, he's doing it to himself. Just like how Douglas Murray had to go cry off of Joe Rogan to go to Lex Fridman and Bill Maher. Because he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle that Joe Rogan and Dave Smith, comics and podcasters, can outsmart a so-called journalist who's been there.
In religious organizations, it's a problem. In political organizations, and it pathologizes the whole culture. You know, most people, 80% of Americans agree on virtually everything. And then there's these fringe people, and they're not political. They're psychopathological narcissists who cloak themselves in political guise. And we all have to learn to distinguish between the political and the psychological. We're not good at it.
We gotta distinguish between the political and psychological. You mean how it's psychological that you are mandating podcasters that you enjoy the comfort of going on and speaking openly, much like have you said in previous terms that you are very much on the side of free speech, are now demanding that Joe Rogan has to censor his guests when they bring up the big I word, or talking about Zionists, or talking about anything remotely involved in Israel. That any sort of narrative that goes against their narrative, that they put up in a pedestal, that they covered, that they cloak it, but trying to say that all the critics are anti-Semites, which has completely failed, has blown back right in front of their face, is crumbling. It's absolutely crumbling. And that's why they need people like Jordan Peterson to go on all these shows and try to be the Lord Savior in protecting this false narrative, this manufactured narrative done by the Zionist cults to defend genocide, to defend the complete onslaught mass slaughter of innocent civilians, to pedestal their own. That's supremacy. That's why Israel is a supremacist state. And more Jews, as they try to deflect the fact that, anyone that criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic, Jewish people support this. No, a lot of Jews don't support this. A lot of Jewish people don't support this. Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Eaton Weiss, Russell Dobular, Katie Helper. All Jewish people, they don't support this. Dan Cohen. I know people in this country here in Canada that don't support this. They're from Jewish backgrounds. They don't support this. But the Zionist fanatics, and sadly a lot of them are from the Christian side of things, they are definitely on board with this and turn themselves into psychopaths to defend this narrative, which shows how narcissistic they are and how they become the crybabies when their feelings get hurt. It's now the shoe is on the other foot, and they're being caught. Here's this also to show, to wrap things up. This young podcaster guy named Tyson Hockley approached Jordan Peterson recently. This is, I believe, at an airport. Went up to Jordan Peterson and asked Jordan Peterson if Jewish Zionists run the world. Which Kanye West and other people have said this, and they said it was anti-Semitic. And I thought that too at the beginning. I thought that was wild. I thought that was crazy. People that mentioned that. Sadly, because of what's happening with Israel, what's happening with free speech, what's happening with policy decisions, with the APEC and everything else, it's kind of feeding into this. It's kind of feeding into this conspiracy that, yeah, maybe Zionists are in control of the world. Why else would they be censoring people and deliberately attacking people on their free speech and threatening to deport them? And that's including American citizens. So here's Jordan Peterson.
Nice to meet you. How you doing? Good. How are you?
What's your name?
Tyson. I'm a podcaster. I did an interview with Andy.
Tyson.
Yeah. So I was wondering, would you be down just to do like a quick, like one question interview for my channel? Like
Sure.
just one question.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think about these theories that are kind of going around right now that Jewish Zionists like control the world? What do you think about people that are saying that?
Well, they've been saying it for like 2,000 years, so it's a quick way for dimwits to gain moral virtue at the expense of other people.
Do you believe in that stuff? Because like it's gaining a lot of popularity, and why do you think narratives like that may not be true stick on and gain so much popularity? Like I see on Twitter, like all that stuff, but that's not necessarily to say it's true, but it spreads like wildfire. So why do you think that narrative in specific, that like Jewish people control the world?
It's easy for people to find someone to blame,
Right.
rather than trying to do something useful themselves.
So it's like scapegoating kind of.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a classic example of that.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. God bless you.
So, kind of deflecting that. And I'm not going to say anything because, if I mention something, what's going to happen. But it would be nice that the Zionists do get a step up, because right now the Islamic-controlled media or the Indian-controlled media or the Arab-controlled media has really just taken over everything. And I just wish the honorable Zionists get themselves a little leverage in this world. I just wish for the best for them. Again, they've been saying this for quite an extensive long time, but as we're seeing things unfold, it's just feeding more into that frenzy. It's feeding more into that frenzy. And it's also the other hypocrisy I should also add to this too, is that Jordan Peterson is a Canadian citizen. Jordan Peterson recently left to America because Canada was crumbling, left to America, and is now going around podcast shows expressing ideals of his own. And based on the current ICE deportation raids, wouldn't that make him an ultimate threat that you're a foreigner, probably with a work visa, that has now established himself in the country of America and expressing views that are differ from the American population? Isn't that considered a threat? Shouldn't he be threatened to deport? I'm just saying, if we had actual principles, if there was actually morals, if there was actually a full-on stand ground and not this back and forth crapism, if we actually had a standing ground, wouldn't he also be deported? I wouldn't want that for him. I don't express that he be deported, but if we're deporting college students or people that write articles just about what they're seeing out in the open, wouldn't Jordan Peterson be also under that target?